What is going on YouTube? Gabins here and welcome to episode 25 of the Tech Pills weekly live stream. Alright, let's jump right to the first news of today. GIMP 2.10.20 just got released last week actually with some interesting features. So let's get through what's new here. So along with the usual bucket of performance improvements and bug fixes, this new version of GIMP has some very cool new features. For starters, non-destructive cropping has been introduced. Cropping an image now doesn't discard the cropped content, instead it just hides it, so that you can more easily restore some of it, if not all of it, back if you're not happy with the result you got the first time around. So this is a very nice new addition and one new feature towards the non-destructive editing feature of GIMP. This is a very important part of what most people look for in a raster bitmap image editing software. Being able to edit and modify images without actually doing anything permanent, so that you can always get back, is very interesting indeed. And some other options include new blur filters. So we have three new blur filters: a variable blur, focus, and lens blur, to give you a full range of options when it comes to creating lifelike, realistic blur effects. So of course, blur is very popular, particularly if you're gonna post-process your images, your photos, and you want to upload them to some social media website, or even if you're doing some like professional work, you just want to create a depth of field effect of some kind. It has a very important artistic value, and the Gaussian blur was fine most of the time, and it still is mostly fine. But I understand and I realize that if you want like a realistic blur effect, as if it was a real lens blur, you need something else. You need something more powerful, and hopefully this is exactly what we need. Another new feature is that the vignette filter received a revamp, and now it interacts with the canvas to better visualize the changes you're making. So again, a nice new feature. And the last feature I want to talk about is a new bloom filter to apply a subtle glowy effect to your picture. So all of these new features are really awesome, as well as, of course, the usual, as I said, performance improvements, bug fixes. And I just want to say that GIMP is probably one of those softwares that are just, we always hear about how great open source software is, but GIMP is usually considered to be like less great than others in a certain respect. I see lots of people love Krita, and don't get me wrong, Krita is actually a great piece of software, but personally, I think that GIMP is very nice as well. It's very professional. It has many advanced options, and I just think that it needs a little bit more love from the whole open source graphics community, and even outside of the open source niche. It has some very advanced features, and if you get around the somewhat complex and not as user-friendly interface, you can actually do a lot with it, and I actually prefer it over other options, including professional ones like Photoshop or even Krita, because it's just what I'm used to, and I know that I can do certain things in GIMP that I would not be able to do in other software. So huge shout out to the GIMP project. I hope that it gets more love, more of the love that it deserves, because I don't think it's as appreciated as other projects. I just wanted to say that. So let's move on to the next news of today. Star Labs announces a new laptop, or should I say laptop. So Star Labs recently announced the Mark IV of their Star laptop 13-inch Ultrabook. So this new version comes with some very needed upgrades and improvements over the previous version, the Mark III, that I reviewed in my channel. They sent one over for review, and you can look for my review in my channel if you want to. It's the Star Laptop Mark III. This was the previous model. So this new model still maintains the 13-inch Ultrabook form factor that the previous models had. And on top of that, we have some Of course, we have some hardware upgrades. This new version comes with a 10th gen Intel CPU, starting from a dual-core i3 option to an hexa-core i7 option. So nice to see that they're expanding like the various CPU options that they have available. The previous version only had the quad-core i7 model, of course with multi-threading, so that was nice. But of course, having a lower end option for people that don't need all that power and just want a sleek Linux machine is actually very appreciated. Also, the RAM has been bumped to 16 gigabytes, and this was one of the main complaints people had about the Mark III. I mean, 8 gigabytes is, I think, at least for me, it's enough to do most of what I do on a laptop. But of course, 16 gigs is like the sweet spot as of right now, as of 2020, for most people's work. I mean, you're not gonna do any graphics intensive stuff, any high level CAD or modeling or whatever on this laptop, but anything that you would expect of an ultrabook with 16 gigs, you can do. The trackpad has also been improved. It's now glass for better tracking and gesture recognition. And I don't think that the previous trackpad was half bad. I think it was actually pretty good. But having a glass surface definitely helps, and just feels better. And if you've used glass trackpads, you know what I'm talking about. Of course, they just feel better. Again, the Mark III trackpad wasn't half bad. I had no complaints there, but it's still a very appreciated improvement. Another update is the screen. The screen is now matte compared to the previous version, which had like a glass panel on top of the display, although it wasn't a touch screen. So I actually kind of liked the glass surface, because it made the whole fit and finish more premium. It made the laptop feel more premium, and it also protected the screen from scratches and dust marks with the keyboard and stuff. But in the long term, I think that I would have preferred a matte screen, if nothing else, because if you're gonna use this in a situation where there is much like natural lighting, you're gonna have a hard time actually seeing what you're looking at in the screen. So having a matte screen option, definitely an appreciated upgrade and appreciated change. Although I don't know if I would call that a necessarily an upgrade, because I just love how nice it looks with the glass panel on top. But sometimes it's just better to have function over form. Finally, just as the icing on the cake, the terrible speakers should now be bigger, better, and most importantly, front-facing. They moved the speakers from, like, they were previously in the previous version, they were firing from the bottom of the laptop, as it is in many other laptops with the same form factor. These particular speakers that they were using were not great. They didn't sound great. They were tinny, the volume was low, and they were practically unusable most of the time. So having this much of an upgrade as far as speakers go, I haven't heard these new speakers, but just for the fact that they're at least judging from the pictures, they're bigger and most importantly for front facing, I'm guessing that they're gonna sound a lot better than they do in the Mark III. So hopefully that's an actual big upgrade. It's something I really wanted to see, and particularly laptops in general don't have great speakers. So having a small form factor ultrabook laptop with these good speakers and of course native Linux support would just be great. So let's hope that they actually deliver with this speaker upgrade. But I mean, the very interesting part here is that they're doing like an incremental upgrade in a sort of way. It's not too different from the previous model, except for these well-needed changes. And I'm happy to see that they listen to the community, to the users' feedback, and that they're actually trying to solve the issues that people had with the previous model. Of course, they're a very young company. I believe that the Mark III was, along with the current Star Lite that they sell, they are the first products that they actually manufacture by themselves. So I understand that there's some, I mean, research and development. They need to understand what the market they're targeting actually wants, and apparently they're actually listening and they're delivering with well needed changes. So very interesting update for the laptop. I'm very curious to see how big of an improvement this model actually is over the previous version. Hopefully Sour Labs wants to send one over for review. I don't know. Of course, I'd be more than happy to try it out. So anyway, you'll see it coming. If they want to send it, you'll see the review as soon as I have it ready. So let's move on to the next news of today. The Pine Tab is now available for pre-order. So the very much anticipated 10-inch Linux tablet from the guys over at Pine64 is now finally available for pre-order. So let's actually, there's not much to say about this news in particular. Let's actually go over what this tablet is. Let's talk about the specs, and let's talk about the target for the I mean, I just want to talk who would want to buy this tablet in particular. So we're talking about a 10-inch IPS touchscreen with a resolution of 1280 by 800, so it's 16 by 10, and very nice form factor, by the way, for screens. The resolution isn't too high, but it's decent. I mean, it's a 10-inch device. You're not gonna notice. The CPU is an all-winner A64 quad-core 1.2 GHz CPU with the Mali 400 graphics card. So pre-bog standard here, not the best ARM CPU out there, not the worst. It gets the job done. One of the things that I really don't like about this device though is the 2 GB of DDR3 RAM. So we're talking about how 8 GB is just barely enough at this day and age, and 2 GB, I don't know where you would go with that. I don't think that's enough for anything practical, and that's kind of sort of half of my point here. But anyway, let's move on. It has 64 GB of onboard eMMC storage, which is enough considering that you can expand it via micro SD card and via the interesting M.2 slot that is accessible inside of the device. So of course you can install an M.2 SSD, a full-fledged M.2 SSD you would buy for your computer. You can install it here in this tablet and you can expand the storage as much as you want. So I'm not too concerned about the 64 GB of onboard storage. I think they're enough. And other things that I don't like, USB Type A 2.0, which is pretty good, and micro USB with OTG support. So it's 2020. Micro USB, it's kind of dead. And if there's still companies producing something with micro USB, I think that they should, I mean, modernize their devices. I don't think that anything should have micro USB. It is a terrible connector. It's prone to breakage. It's complex. I mean, the shape has those little pins that anchor into your device. It's just, I don't like it. I never liked it. It was nice that it was universal, and it is still used here and there for older devices and, I mean, more legacy devices. But come on, guys, I think that they could have gone with USB Type C here. So I don't know. It also has a micro HDMI port, so this is actually pretty interesting. You can, of course, connect this to a big monitor, and with the USB Type A or the micro USB with OTG, you can use mouse and keyboard with it, and you can basically have some sort of convergent experience. Of course, this depends on the software support, but as far as the hardware goes, the support is there, which is definitely very much appreciated. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that the microSD card slot is also bootable, which is very interesting. I don't like using microSD cards to put my operating system on, and this is part of the reason why I don't really like too much the Raspberry Pi in general, because it relies on microSD, and I just don't like, I like microSD for expansion, like for extra storage, but as far as, I mean, booting your operating system from it, I don't really like it, because those memories are not made for this, and in particular they tend to be slow and to degrade fast. So I would have gone with, I mean, it's still interesting for this particular case, because it's a very new device and software support is all over the place for it, and there are many distributions supporting it. And so having the possibility to quickly flash an SD card and try out a different distribution is obviously a very interesting option, and you don't have to overwrite the onboard eMMC. So that's again very nice addition for this particular use case. I wouldn't use this as my daily driver. I would probably use the micro SD to try out different distributions, see what I like, and then just flash whatever to the eMMC, and then just use the micro SD as storage. That's what I would do. Also, the M.2 slot, I don't know if that's bootable. I really have no idea, but even if it was just like a I mean, just a non-bootable but mountable storage inside of the operating system, it would still be nice because I could use those 64 gigabytes for the root partition only. It's still Linux. This is the point. This is a Linux device, so I can treat it as a Linux computer, full-fledged one. I could mount like the root partition in the like in the eMMC, and then use the M.2 for my home partition, and that would be actually pretty great. I would dig such a setup myself. And as far as the built-in operating system goes, this device ships with the UBports Ubuntu Touch operating system, which is not my favorite mobile Linux distribution out there, but it's still one of the best currently supported versions of, mobile Linux, if you will. And of course, it's very feature-rich. It has many quality of life touches here and there. So it's, of course, they want to go with something that works as much as possible out of the box. But let's talk about who would actually want to buy this device, because in my opinion, this isn't something that everyone should want to use, should want to buy, because this is a very specific device. The hardware isn't too great in the first place, so if you're thinking about buying one of these and just using it for work, or I don't know, for browsing the internet, probably for media consumption it's decent, but still 2 gigabytes of RAM nowadays, even with a browser, that goes away very fast. I think that this device is more targeted towards developers, and that's mostly what Pine64 is doing right now. They're releasing devices for developers to play with, to improve support for touch-enabled and mobile-enabled Linux distributions. So this also reflects to in the price tag. This comes for just like $100, and even the accessories, like the optional accessories, like the keyboard cover and things, they just cost. I think it was $20 for the keyboard cover. It's pretty cheap. The device all around is pretty cheap, so it's understandable that the specs aren't that great. And being this accessible to developers, I could buy one and play around with it and build some applications for it, and even maybe like improve some things in various desktop environments, various mobile operating systems. And that would benefit the whole community. And of course, we're still talking here about pure Linux, pure open source software. This is not Android. This is not like that half closed mess that Android is. So of course, having like this device on the market for developers to play around with is a great value and will benefit the whole community. So kudos to Pi64 for doing these kind of things, for investing in this kind of technology, because I know that this won't have a huge market adoption, of course, but it still brings the community forward. So this is a great project. If you're a developer and if you're interested in developing for the mobile Linux platform, definitely buy this tablet. It's just $100 after all. It's not gonna burn a hole in your pocket anyway. So again, very nice product. I actually would prefer to buy the like the Pine phone myself, because I don't really like. If I would have wanted to buy a tablet, I would want to use it as a laptop replacement, so full-on laptop replacement, and this isn't what I'm looking for. The Pine phone, though, I'm using my phone less and less, to be honest. So having like a device to play around with for testing out my applications that I obviously develop for mobile as well, with GTK and Python. But actually having the possibility to try them on an actual device would be really interesting. I would be very tempted to buy the Pine phone, not the Pine Tab, at least for me, but I know that there are people out there who are interested in this kind of stuff. So again, very nice product, but let's move on. So next news of today, Mango HUD version 0.4 is out with built-in benchmarking. So let's talk about Mango HUD. So Mango HUD is a heads-up display. It's an overlay for it's made for games. So it's an overlay for games similar to Fraps if you're coming from Windows, and if you know anything about that. It shows some very nice information about the currently running game on the screen, and it has a very nice GUI. It's configurable, and you can just toggle it very easily by just pressing F12. So great feature set there. The nice thing about Mango HUD is that it offers so many customization options, including information about your CPU usage, GPU usage, temperatures, and I don't know, there's just a whole lot of features. And now they just introduced a built-in benchmarking tool. So they already had previously a benchmarking tool, more of a logging tool than benchmarking by itself. And the way it worked, it was it still works this way. You just tell in the configuration file where to save a particular log for a certain game. So if you want to log the performance of a particular game because you want to benchmark it on your machine, you specify the path of the log file you want to output to, and then you just feed that log file to the Flying Mango website, and it generates the whole benchmarking information with graphs and everything, and it's just very, very nice. Now they introduced a new option to do a built-in benchmark of your game in memory without having to save any file at all. So it's very handy. You just have to press F2, and now when the logging starts, you will see a red dot in the HUD. So very nice addition there. It wasn't easy to understand when the logging actually started, and this visual indication definitely makes it easier to understand. And it will just start logging in memory, so in your RAM, and when you stop logging, it will show a new HUD panel showing the relevant benchmark information, like the 97th percentile, the 1% low, and the FPS graph over time. So definitely great update. This is one of the best gaming software accessories that I have in my systems, and I always enable it in all my games because it's just so great. One other thing that I just love about Mango HUD is the ability to show the frame time graph by default. So it's actually particularly useful to see how stable your frame rate is, and to understand where actually your frame dips happen, and then you can just go ahead and debug it and understand what's causing the this little frame skip, or this little slowdown, this little hiccup, you know. And actually, thanks to Mango HUD, I recently realized that my CPU was bottlenecking my GPU. And by using like the login feature, I saw that the CPU in certain areas, in certain moments, the CPU was actually requiring more time to render its part of the frame than the GPU. So to solve that, I just overclocked further my CPU. I gave it another 200 megahertz, and now the problem is solved. So definitely a great tool if you're a gamer, if you like overclocking, if you want to tune the performance of your games to your particular system. Definitely check it out. It's, of course, it's free, it's open source, it's available in GitHub, and if you're running Arch, it's available in the AUR. If you're running anything else, it's probably easy to get as well. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. AMD announces new Ryzen CPUs. So, following some optimizations in their 7nm manufacturing process, AMD has announced new versions for their top-of-the-line Ryzen CPUs. The new CPUs, the Ryzen 5 3600 XT, Ryzen 7 3800 XT, and Ryzen 9 3900 XT should provide an incremental performance boost over their non-XT counterparts. So in particular, AMD says that the 3900 XT has approximately a 4% increase in single-threaded performance compared to the 3900X. The interesting thing here is that these new XT series CPUs should have at least the same price as the X series ones. So effectively, they should represent or at least it suggests that these new CPUs are more of a newer revision of the existing series CPUs, but with enough improvements to justify a name change. So very nice to see AMD. They keep pushing new CPUs, and with the Zen 2 architecture, of course, this is very nice. We're seeing lots of improvements in the CPU space thanks to the return of AMD, and in the graphics space as well with the Navi series, and with the soon big Navi GPUs that will probably release later this year. I hope that we'll see a shake in the GPU market as well. I have a 5700 XT in my system. It's an AMD GPU. For the price, it's very good. I really like this GPU. Of course, the problem is still that if you just want one raw performance and you want the best performance out of your money, you still have to go with NVIDIA. I don't like NVIDIA because I'm a Linux user, and NVIDIA on Linux just doesn't work as well as AMD does. And in particular, the fact that AMD GPU drivers are open source and built into the kernel, just great. We're talking about CPUs here though. As far as CPUs go, the Ryzen series from the first generation, the first generation was kind of, it wasn't the most stable, but was still pretty great. And now that we are in the third generation with Zen 2, it's just great to see how much we're getting for our money. If you want to build a system today with like a Ryzen 5 that costs like $200, something like that, there are some Ryzen 5s, even Zen 2 ones, you can find for, I think you can find them for $150, maybe a little more than that. Anyway, we have so many options to build systems nowadays with these new Ryzen systems. It's just great. I'm just grateful that AMD made a comeback in the CPU space. I'm still hoping to see them make a big comeback in the GPU space. But let's see where that goes. Alright guys, and this is gonna wrap it up for this week's live stream. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you like this video, please make sure to press the thumbs up button down there. Also remember to subscribe to my channel for more of this. Make sure to check out the TechPills community at techpills.technology/community. You can find the Telegram group, the Telegram channel, the Discord server, and you can also find the relevant links in the left side of the screen. This way, yeah. You can find the relevant links in the left side of the screen. You can use the QR codes. Make sure to join the TechPills community. And I'll see you guys next week. I don't know where I went with that. So let's try to do this again. Let's see you guys next week.